Trust the Profits Breeders' Cup coverage is brought to you by PlayUp Racebook, the most horse player-friendly racebook in the industry. PlayUp Racebook is always your best bet.
Let's do a deep dive into the Europeans coming to the Breeders' Cup. Salutations and welcome, friends. My name is Matthew Desantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle @FailToMenace. Really excited for today's show for Countdown to Keeneland. We're just a couple of days away from the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland in Lexington, Kentucky. The post draws have been announced. The fields are out. The PPs are out. We can all look at the racing form, start diving into this. So very excited to be joined by a very special guest today. But before we get to that, just want to give a quick reminder to check out our sponsor, PlayUp Racebook. If you go and sign up today, you will receive a 50% deposit bonus for up to $250. And additionally, they're running a Breeders' Cup special. So if you deposit $100 or more before the Breeders' Cup, they will give you an additional $25 free wager. And maybe you want to use one of those on one of the various Europeans that are coming over and invading Kentucky for the Breeders' Cup. They have had a lot of success here in recent years, but obviously on the turf. And so here to join me is Mal Bamford from the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Mal is an expert on all things horse racing, and I did not want to talk to anyone else other than him when it came time to talk about some of the Europeans coming over. So Mal, how are you doing, and how are you feeling about this Breeders' Cup card?
Yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you very much for having me, Matthew. It's I cover the Major League Baseball for the network as well. So the Breeders' Cup's kind of snuck up on me because the baseball it's inhumane, the amount of grind you have to do, the 162 consecutive games. So, and then we've been doing the playoffs and into the World Series, and then all of a sudden you kind of bang, the Breeders' Cup's here. So this has been refreshing for me the last couple of weeks to be able to get my head in, and what I love most about Breeders' Cup weekend is often we'll do something like the Kentucky Derby or we'll do the classics in the States. I know you've come on and we've talked about this before, but this is and we'll often just talk about that singular race. But this has got a meeting feel about it, a sort of a European meeting feel about it. So when I get stuck into the racing on a Saturday in the UK, I'm looking at the whole card. I'm looking at stringing together 3 or 4 bets. I'm looking at the 2-year-old race and the championship race. And this is what we're doing here. We've got however many, 20 races, something like that.
Yeah.
So we've got a whole thing that we can get our teeth into. And I feel more comfortable doing that than sort of looking at one race and trying to pick a winner. So yeah, it's snuck up on me a little bit, but it's been a nice change to look at this rather than trying to pick some MLB winners.
Yes, and as a native of Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, I am a huge Philadelphia Phillies fan, and I've been following along. And they have Game 3 tonight. Obviously, the last one was rained out, and so we'll see how this goes. But it also, honestly, the Phillies snuck up on me because I was not expecting them to be very good. So they've been.
You weren't the only one.
No, I did. Sadly, I did not put any money on them being in the World Series. That's for sure. So. But this is great. So I guess I wanted to start off, you mentioned some of the championship meets taking place over in England throughout the year. And I think for people in the United States who follow horse racing, most of the big trainers point their horses for the entire year towards the Breeders' Cup. That's the goal. That's the end game for these breeders. A little bit of a variation for the Triple Crown races for the 3-year-olds, but by and large, everybody's pointed towards the Breeders' Cup. Yet sometimes we don't get the best European horses coming over, and I think sometimes North American racing fans don't always understand why that is. So I was wondering if you could maybe put in context, how do Europeans think about the Breeders' Cup? Maybe how do regular fans over there think about the Breeders' Cup? How do some of the trainers treat this time of year in the Breeders' Cup, and is this a highlight for them in some ways?
Yeah, I think it's changed a little bit recently because, just generally speaking, the world's got smaller. It's easier for people to travel around. It's easier to get horses from A to B than it was even 15 or 20 years ago. You'll get the big yards coming over. So Aidan O'Brien will bring an army across. Charlie Appleby, Godolphin will bring an army across. But for smaller trainers and owners, there's still a cost there. It's still quite prohibitive. Often the European horses will ship to the Emirates for the winter as well. You've got all the Dubai World Cup, the racing at Meydan and Jebel Al Ali and places like that. And the other thing is the time of year. It doesn't really, our schedule has forever, the establishment has always been set up that to bring your horses out, your 2 and your 3-year-olds, which is the majority of what we're going to see, or even your younger, your 4-year-olds. They will come out in April or May for a debut run, a little tune-up. They'll then attack either the classics, if it's the Guineas, or the Derby through the summer, have 2 or 3 races, go to Ascot in June, and then you've got your kind of championship races, which are the Champions Day, you've got the big race day at Ascot, and then you have the Arc weekend at Longchamp. And then you get to this time of year now, in first week in November. Yeah. The 2-year-olds will be already. Richard Fahey, we're going to talk a little bit about his horse, the Platinum Queen. He said she's already getting a winter coat. So the horses will turn. He's had to clip her. He's had to give her a trace clip before they can take her across, because the horses will be turning. It's Northern Europe. It's not particularly warm. I mean, I live on the northeast coast of England. It's freezing today. Richard Fahey trains about an hour down south. He trains in Yorkshire, about an hour the south of me, and it's a colder climate. So the horses will be on the turn, and they'll just put them away. I think the prize money's a lot, but then if you're looking at these horses in terms of their career, and their ultimate aim is really to go to stud with them, the difference between the prize money and what they can make at stud is it's not a similar thing. So it's a big risk taking a horse across. A horse might not recover even one trip. It's a 12-hour flight or what have you. If you're risking a horse, a 2-year-old for its next year, for its classic 3-year-old year, it's a big thing. And then I don't know how the rules changed about the Lasix and stuff, because that was always a big deal. We were at a disadvantage because we never got a run on that. So then you had to either take your horse across and put it on Lasix or something, or you take it across, run it as you normally would here, and then you're at a huge disadvantage. So quite a lot of things. But I think you will end up seeing more horses going across in time. But then if you flip it, if you ask how many American horses come to Ascot, right? Wesley Ward brings 2, maybe 2 or 3. Yep. And is that it? Like, you've never seen one, do you?
I think Grand Motion might bring a couple. I mean, Spenderella came over this year, but I mean, you're right. It's a handful. It's a very, very small. It's basically 2. Yeah. It's Wes and Grand Motion, and that's about it. So
it's kind of a similar juxtaposition. We would say, why don't you come across for the Arc meeting? You know, that meeting last weekend at Longchamp a couple of weeks ago. A lot of prize money, very prestigious, a lot of fun as well for people coming across. So I think it's just the flip side of that dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely, and also our horses hate running on anything that's not firm turf.
Absolutely.
So I think they would have called off the Arc if it was here in the United States. And when you looked at that footing a couple of weeks ago, very soft ground, and that's something that's actually come up in a couple of the past performances when looking at maybe why some of the horses maybe didn't fire as well as they normally do that weekend at Longchamp, because of just the ground being so soft. But you brought her up, so let's actually transition into the first horse, which is the Platinum Queen in the Juvenile Turf Sprint, which is a race that is kind of quirky, I think, here for a lot of us in North America, because turf sprinting is not really at the top of mind for a lot of us. There's a lot of horses that are traditional dirt sprint horses that are actually trying the turf here just to get in a race, because there's not a juvenile dirt sprint. So a horse like Tyler's Tribe or Speedboat Beach, which are both very accomplished dirt sprinters, are just trying it over their surface for the first time. But the Platinum Queen is a kind of an amazing horse in that she qualified for the turf sprint with the adults, but the Breeders' Cup will not allow her to run against the older horses. So how special is this horse? I mean, is she, the appropriate morning line favorite? I mean, is she deserved in that sense? I mean, she's obviously beat older mixed company over there. So just trying to get a sense of how good she really is.
Yeah, she's a plus 350 favorite at the moment, plus 250, plus 250 favorite. The thing with these 2-year-olds and this time of year is, however many questions I answer about it, there's going to be more questions than answers, because she's 2, it's this time of year, you're shipping across. Like I say, she's already started getting her winter coat in, and the Platinum Queen's developed really quickly. So she broke the track record at Goodwood, which was kind of the performance that made everyone stand up and take notice of her. She won last time out the Prix l'Abbé, which is the big sprint on the Carder Longchamp on Arc Weekend. And that was on that soft going. Now, the word soft has appeared in quite a lot of her victories, but that's not something they've actively sought out. I mean, if it's rained, it's rained, but it's a race also. They've taken her, you know. Listening to Richard Fahey, that word soft is not a necessity. He doesn't think that she needs the word soft in the title. Have you got a weather forecast for Keeneland at the weekend?
It's going to be actually about 73 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. So it's going to be fast and firm for the turf.
So she's versatile in terms of going. She's versatile in terms of style. She can front run, but she doesn't have to. She's had 7 races now, and she's learned really quickly. She was quite skittish, as a lot of young 2-year-olds can be. But she's grown up pretty quickly. Holly Doyle will take the ride. Holly Doyle is the absolute darling of British racing at the moment. She's shattering glass ceilings left, right, and centre. Taking all before her. She's a part of a power couple here. She's married to a jockey as well. She's the absolute darling of the media. So Richard Fahey, I've sort of picked this horse out to talk about, because he's relatively local to me, so this is a bit of a homer for me. It's only Richard Fahey's 3rd non-runner. Midland Park Racing, you might recognise the colours, the kind of light blue with the orange epaulets. They're a big operation. Richard Fahey's really good. So she's good. She's got lots of ticks in a lot of boxes, a lot of question marks, but like you've just mentioned about the opposition, they've all got a lot of question marks because the 2-year-olds doing things they're not really used to. The turn is the one thing Platinum Queen will never have seen before. They just going out and straight 5 furlongs. Right. So, and I think I was just talking to you before we came on air there, and you said the draw hasn't been particularly kind to her, that she stuck out a little bit wide. So how quickly is the turn coming up on that 5 furlong course?
That's a good question. So it shouldn't come up too quickly. It's not like last year at Del Mar where it came up really quick. So she should have a little bit of a run. I mean, she should be able to get maybe in the 3 path or something like that if she is able to cross and clear a little bit. But obviously that is a different dynamic. I mean, for people who've not watched European turf sprint racing, it is just a straight line and you're just kind of going straight out and you're not dealing with the turn. And that's something that a horse like Golden Pal, who we're going to get to in a little bit, when he comes over to Europe, always seems to be an issue because I think relies on that turn to kind of get a little bit of a breather and to kind of get ready for the stretch run. Whereas that's a new dynamic for a lot of these European horses to go around a turn for the first time. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. The turns, it seems counterintuitive to me how important it doesn't seem like it should be that important. You know what I mean? I can go around the corner, no problem. I've done it. Like I do it regularly, Matthew. But someone likened the difference in US racing and British race courses as NASCAR and Formula One. It's a great comparison. I never even gave that a second thought, but US is just left hand down, where every week, every day in British racing, you're going left, right, uphill, downhill. Some of them are figures of 8, all sorts of different things. So you tend to get that the saying horses for courses is never more sort of attributable than it is when you're watching British racing.
That is a great comparison. I never thought of it that way either, but that's a really good point.
Yeah, it wasn't mine. I'm not claiming it, but it is good. You're right.
Well, let's talk about another juvenile, and this is one coming from a huge operation, and that's Charlie Appleby's horse, Silver Knot, who's going to be running in the juvenile turf. This is a horse. Obviously, Charlie Appleby's had incredible success in the limited amount of times he's brought horses over here. I think he's 6 for 11 winning at the Breeders' Cup, which is just surreal. This is a horse that has 2 Group 3 wins over there, stretched out to a mile last time out. How good is Silver Knot? Where does he rank, you think, in Appleby's barn? I mean, he's got a lot of great 2-year-olds. He's always got a lot of great 2-year-olds. Yeah. But is this one we feel like he has a live shot here in the spot?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know how Charlie Appleby in these major operations keep up with the amount of horses that they have. You're talking sort of hundreds, so well over 3 figures, sometimes up to 200 in the barn. Silver Knot is a plus 137 favourite here. William Buick will take the ride for, like you say, Godolphin. The horse won the Solario Stakes at Sandown Park, which is that Group 3 that you mentioned, is 3 for 5 career and travelled really, really well. So back to a mile. Again, I think we now 2 turns.
2 turns for Keeneland.
So very similar to the other 2-year-old conversations that we're going to have. Question marks to answer. The time of year, again, with the 2-year-olds. But if anyone knows, it's going to be Charlie Appleby. I think you'd have to... It's the strength of opposition here. It's an ignorance of alternatives. You're looking at a plus 650, the rest of the field, Victoria Road, horses like that. So you'd have to give me one to beat Silver Knot, Matthew.
I don't know if I have one to beat Silver Knot. I like Charlie Appleby's horses quite a bit in this spot. I mean, I think he's, like you said, he's had a lot of success bringing horses over. He understands. I think you mentioned at the beginning, you understand that transition that's going to take place. You understand the travel and the logistics behind getting these horses prepped and ready to run. And he doesn't just do it here. He's obviously brought horses over to New York tracks at Saratoga, Belmont. So he's accustomed to bringing these horses over, as Aidan O'Brien is. And I think it's why these bigger operations can have success on days like this, because they understand the logistics behind all of this, getting a horse ready, knowing what time of year it's going to be, understanding the way that American turf racing is versus European turf racing. So Silver Knot does feel like one of the stronger spots in this juvenile turf. So.
And I think when you've had the amount of success that these large operations have, you can almost draw your own form line at home. You now know what kind of horse need to win that race because you've seen it. You had that horse last year. So you have something similar at home with a similar disposition, who's doing similar work at home, because we don't have obviously one of the big differences here is we don't have the public work that you have. Where you don't have a Clocker's Corner. These are all up on their own private gallops. These are up. Richard Farhees will be out on the moors around North Yorkshire. It's not a public thing. So Charlie Appleby will know what he had last year, what it took to win the race, and he'll know this is what I've got this year, and that'll fit into that pattern. So you absolutely have to trust him. Really, I mean, there's no reason not to.
Absolutely. And it's funny, as you were talking, I was just looking over that juvenile turf field, and there was nobody else I was going to throw out there other than
Oh, there you go.
Like, it's just, I mean, that's another one where, like, there's a horse in that race, Major Dude, who's a Todd Pletcher horse, that was a dirt horse, and that is a dirt horse. And they just like ran him on turf last time, and he won a win in your in race. And like suddenly he's one of the top American turf horses. It's like he's not, so it's just a very muddled division here in the United States. I think those 2-year-olds, I feel like we have a much stronger crop of 2-year-old juvenile turf horses for the fillies. I feel like that's a much stronger race for the Americans. There's a few, I think, really strong contenders there, but the juvenile turf, I'm a little more skeptical about. But let's transition from Friday to Saturday. Talk about some of the adult horses. You mentioned this horse at the beginning, Kinross, and this Breeders' Cup Mile is what a race for the Europeans. I mean, there's a lot of really big names. There's names that we know over here as well, a horse like Modern Games. But then you have a horse like Dreamlopper. You have Order of Australia, who won a Breeders' Cup before at a huge price for Aidan O'Brien, Malavath, Pogo, and then, of course, Kinross drawing the outside. This is a horse, I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about, but obviously has won a couple of Group 1s over there, is coming on a little bit of a hot streak. It seems like it's won 4 straight. So talk to me a little bit about Kinross and kind of whether or not he's a horse to fade or consider in the spot.
Well, there's the couple here, the top 2 in the market are quite well clear. Modern Games plus 250 and Kinross plus 300. And I'm kind of fading both of them. We'll start with Kinross that you asked me about. Kinross won the British Champions Sprint Stakes, 6 furlongs. That was the trip. Won at Longchamp on Arc Day in the mud, as you've already mentioned. Has won. That last win was over 6 furlongs. Kinross has form over 7 furlongs. My concern here is the ground. We said earlier on that the Platinum Queen was versatile. Didn't necessarily need the word soft in that going description to go well. I think Kinross might need that. That word appears in a lot. in a lot of the form. Now, if the ground's quick and also around a turn, or around 2 turns around a mile's a kind of a specialist distance. I think 7 furlongs is the classic specialist distance. That's the 400 meters, isn't it? That's the one you have to be a specialist at. But I think a proper miler, these real professional milers, might just get to Kinross, because Kinross, like I say, recent form is over shorter. And I think round 2 turns as well. I just think it's going to take a little while to get organised. And I think one of the milers will win this, but it's not going to be. I don't think Modern Games is the one.
It's funny. So Modern Games is a horse that I think every single North American horse racing fan knows because of the fiasco last year at Del Mar,
we saw that
with the accidental scratch and then putting him back in. I mean, it was an accident. He wasn't meant to be scratched, but there was miscommunication between the gate crew and the operators, and suddenly he was scratched. Then he was added back in. Then he ran for purse money only, and then he won. And so, he obviously just came off, an impressive win, coming over here, winning the Woodbine Mile, winning that easily over a horse like Ivar. Then going back, finishing second in the last time out in those champion stakes. But I'm interested why you're fading, because he's a horse I think a lot of North Americans really like, mainly because he's one of the few Euros that they all really know, I think. But I'm interested why you're maybe going another direction there.
Man, that was the most head-scratching thing you've ever seen last year.
It was. Yes, it was.
Absolutely baffling. So, yeah, Modern Games, last time out, I think you can put a line through the form. What happened last time out was Charlie Appleby was going for the Trainers' Championship over here, and it's a prize money thing. So Charlie Appleby was trying to pinch a few quid by sticking Modern Games in there. Looked like he found a soft opportunity, and was trying to pinch a few quid. And the horse actually got turned over, and that was on sticky ground as well. That was on soft going at Ascot, and I think that was a relatively hard race. And I think that will have taken a lot out of Modern Games. So you've got sort of a sandwich travel spot, came back across from Woodbine, where the horse won really easily actually at Woodbine. But then a race that wasn't really in favourable conditions at Ascot, to then travel back again to the States. And I just think the horse might just gone over the top. I mean, that race was 5 weeks ago, maybe, the Modern Games race.
Not even. The Modern Games race was October 15th, so like 3.5
Oh, there you go.
Ago,
yes. All right. So 3. Yeah. So I just think that was a tough race, and it can take a horse time to recover from running on that going, which Modern Games wouldn't necessarily be used to going off. So I was happy to fade that as well. So yeah, I'm not convinced by the chances of Modern Games or Kinross. The one I like, Matthew, and you need to tell me about this, whether I'm not on the right track here, is Annapolis, which is the Todd Pletcher horse, and I think it's quite progressive. So on the grounds, I'm fading the other two. I was looking for something else, and that's kind of where I alighted. So,
he's a horse that has gotten some very good trips. He's kind of gotten the right trip a few races in a row. Now, I think he can probably get the right trip again here. He's a horse. It's funny. I've actually been fading him in a lot of spots, and I keep losing money because he keeps proving me wrong. I mean, he's a horse, you're right, has progressed beautifully. That last time out, that Coolmore Turf Mile, or the Keeneland Turf Mile, ran his best race yet. So I think he's a real live shot, and you're getting decent odds on him at 10-1 here in the United States. So it's he's a horse I feel like is just continuing to get better. He's a 3-year-old. I mean, by American standards, he's pretty lightly raced in only 7 career races. He's never finished out of the exacta. So he's a horse I think you have to take seriously. One of my concerns is that Pletcher, he is a little bit like Aidan O'Brien. He brings a ton of horses to the Breeders' Cup every year, but he only wins at about an 8% rate. He doesn't win a ton. So he's been in a little bit of a cold streak at the Breeders' Cup, but I think Annapolis is one of those liver shots here. So I think you're onto something. If you feel confident, and you maybe convince me to maybe fade and look past Modern Games, I think Annapolis makes a lot of sense as maybe the top American horse in the spot.
Yeah, I'll definitely be having a small interest in that, I think.
Well, a horse that I think a lot of people are interested in is Nashua. And this is, of course, the John Gosden horse in the filly and Mare Turf. She's never finished out of the money. She keeps improving. It came in second last time out, but still was the betting favorite that day. You mentioned Holly Doyle before. Holly Doyle on the mount here, progeny of Frankel. What's the ceiling for this filly? I mean, she seems really special. I mean, is she that good? And what do you expect from her at the Breeders' Cup?
Yeah, they're really excited about this. John Gosden and his son now, Thady Gosden, who shares training responsibilities with John. Yeah, so it's just got a lot of ticks in a lot of boxes, like you've said. 2 Group 1s already in the bank by Frankel. Again, the Holly Doyle interest always ramps up the profile of these horses when they're going. So one has a classic, won the French 1,000 guineas. That seems like forever ago, back at Chantilly. Back in probably May time, I think. Was actually beaten on Arc Day. Arc Day was just such a weird thing because of the weather. Was beaten by a 66 to 1 shot, but actually didn't do an awful lot wrong. She beat everything else. She beat Above the Curve, who reopposes today. Reopposes on Saturday, sorry, and is the 3rd favourite. Overcame a really bad draw as well, and like I say, was only beaten by 1, and that was in a field of, I think it was 24 or something went in that race.
It was a huge field.
It was a huge field. She's done nothing wrong. She beat them all and got chinned on the line by a 66 to 1 shot, which can happen in sticky going. Drops back in trip a little bit here, half a furlong. So this is 1 mile, 1.5. Bit of a shorter trip. So again, not ground dependent, has one on different going, and is still improving. The draw, what was the draw, Matthew, on this thing?
So she got I'll tell you here in a second. I'm just drawing. She's drawing 3rd, so a little bit on the inside, but not too far inside.
Okay, so yeah, I think she'll be absolutely fine there. The other one I do like is Tuesday.
Okay.
I kind of talked myself into Tuesday a little bit. I just don't think that Tuesday ran in that race at Longchamp and just wasn't suited by the conditions like a lot of other things were. So I think at a price, Tuesday is 7 to 1 trading at the minute, and that's why I was at plus 162. So Tuesday at a price, I think, can run into the money. So I'll be taking on. I'll certainly be back in Nashua for Holly Doyle and John Gosden, but I'll be keeping Tuesday in my lines as well.
Yeah, Tuesday's an interesting horse. I mean, she was kind of the talk of Aidan O'Brien's barn for a while. Beat Nashua actually in that Epsom. Was the Epsom Oaks, I think.
That's right. Yeah,
and won that race. Then she started running against some of the boys. The form kind of started to maybe look a little off, but I think she's a really good horse as well. Obviously, the big American horse in this race is In Italian. This is a horse that has kind of burst onto the scene. Was kind of thought as like Chad Brown's 2nd or 3rd or maybe even 4th best filly or mare on the turf, and In Italian's just developed this front running style of just going out and wiring the field time after time after time. So we'll see if she can do it again. I mean, I that's another horse that I'm maybe a little out on. I think she's just going to have a better caliber of horse chasing her this time. And I think there might be a little bit more company up front. So at a shorter price on the morning line, I'm not sure I want to get behind that, but that's a horse I'll probably take a fair amount of action too. Plus she's going the extra 16th of a mile, which might not make a huge difference, but I do think when you start getting some of these closers with that devastating turn of foot can make all the difference in the world. So the other horse that we wanted to touch on, and then we can talk about any other horses you're interested in, but Highfield Princess. This is the turf sprint race. And what's funny is I think North American racing fans, there is not a horse that North American bettors like to try to beat than Golden Pal. Every North American racing fan, when you talk to them, will say, oh, this is the race. Golden Pal's going to lose. Golden Pal's going to lose. And all Golden Pal does is when he's in North America, he wins. And when he goes overseas, he runs terribly. And so he forgets the gates open. I mean, Irad Ortiz wasn't even ready at Royal Ascot when the gates were opened, and he always seems to have problems over there. And he just is not good in this spot, but he's just so dominant here in the United States. But Highfield Princess is, a great horse in her own right. And so I'm just curious kind of what your thoughts are in that turf sprint. Do you see Highfield Princess as a challenge to Golden Pal, who's of course the morning line favorite?
Yeah, well, this is really the reason I wanted to talk about Highfield Princess, so we could talk about Golden Pal. Just
Of
to try
course.
and challenge yourself to try and find something that can beat Golden Pal. And I love Golden Pal. How could you not love Golden Pal? I was even mildly entertained by what happened to Ascot when Ortiz just that sort of 5 seconds from when he missed the break to when he looked like he'd been shot out of a cannon and then disappeared backwards again. Just the whole thing was just quite good fun. So Highfield Princess is a top class European sprinter. I mean, she's really good, and she gets around. She's won at the Curragh last time, a race called the Flying Five. She's won the Nunthorpe at York, a race where she beat the Platinum Queen. She's won at Deauville in France in the Prix Maurice de Guist. Is a winner at Newcastle. We talked earlier. Newcastle is my local track where a lot of horses have started their careers off because of the nice new surface and track that they've got there. So Highfield Princess has won at Newcastle, so a bit of a homer for me. Now, again, travels really, really strongly. A proper flying machine, but travels really strongly. The turn thing is going to be an issue. Like we say, she'll just go in a straight line. We know Golden Pal is the expert, in fact, at doing what it does. Now, you could look at the form and ask why Highfield Princess finished 7th last time at Ascot, but you could have thrown a blanket over the first 7. That was a 24-runner race. You could have easily, the horse, I think it was beaten in total a length. And finished 7th. So there was 5 horses managed to squeeze in between. So if it finished second beating a length, you wouldn't really bat an eyelid, do you know what I mean? But because you finished 7th, you think, hang on. But yeah, you could have thrown a blanket over the first 7. So I really do like the horse's chances. I don't know if it can catch Golden Pal. I don't. In fact, if anything, the presence of Highfield Princess makes the price for Golden Pal, because you can take a plus 187 price now about Golden Pal. If Highfield Princess isn't in the race, Golden Pal's minus 160 or something like that.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Maybe her presence makes the price for Golden Pal. So I would love to see her run well. I'd love to see her I just want to see her get close, even if they turn in and she's within a length or something. Just a little go on, my son. Just a little. Yeah. I'd like to see a race. I don't want to see Golden Pal 5 lengths back to Highfield Princess, 5 lengths back to the rest. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Although there's still something impressive about watching Golden Pal lead a procession down the home straight.
Well, he's a horse that it's so interesting. It's all at the break for him. I mean, if he breaks well, if he breaks like he shot out of a cannon, then it's over from the start. But when he doesn't break well, then suddenly he looks a lot more susceptible to other challenges, but he just uses that dominant break to just get out on such an easy lead. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've watched him run and the race is over in the first 100 yards because he's just 3 lengths clear of everybody else. And you're just like, all right, well, this race is over. And so, I
love those new, the drone shots that they have now from above the stalls, because you get a real perspective of the gates open and it's gone. Like, it's the other 9 is still there, and that's Golden Pal's gone. It's off the screen. Where's it gone? It's really impressive. It's great to watch.
It is great to watch. But he, he's a horse that's had some drama here in the United States. I mean, he didn't run particularly well 2 out at the Troy. He didn't break well that day, and just kind of like actually was sitting second or third, and then kind of made a run and was able to kind of barely get past some lesser competition. But then there was talk of him actually going to a dirt sprint race potentially at one point, not going on the turf. And so his trainer was then he had a month off in training for no reason. He started training, then stopped training, and then got back on. And so there was just a lot. And then he goes out and sets the track record the next time out. And you're like, all right, well, never mind. And so, it seemed like he was right back to his normal self. So, he's just one of those horses. I know a lot of Americans are going to play against him in this spot. So now I'm curious though, Highfield Princess, is she a pure deep closer? I mean, is she going to be sitting? Does she try to break pretty alertly? I mean, does she like to sit more mid pack and then make a run? I mean, what's her running style like in comparison to somebody like Golden Pal?
Yeah, when she won at York, the Nunthorpe, she actually came from quite a long way back. Now, obviously, 5 furlongs, you're never going to get too far, but she did come from sort of 5 or 6 lengths back that day. But again, she's fairly versatile in her style. So if she gets to the front, again, she's a speedball. Not in the style of Golden Pal, but she's certainly not going to, the jockey won't be taking a pull. She won't be getting, she won't be going across and settling in. She will just go. So she'll try and lay up as close to Golden Pal, because again, she does travel really, really strongly. So she can pick up off a fast pace.
That's good to know. So Mal, any other horses that you're looking at, any other Euros that you're particularly interested in, and either, talking about maybe a long shot that you're interested in, or horse we haven't touched on that maybe piqued your interest?
I couldn't pick out many long shots, to be honest. I feel like my portfolio was a bit boring, but the Breeders' Cup Turf was a race that obviously interested me. Nation's Pride will go for Charlie Appleby. The thing with this thing is that it's had 3 runs in the US. I think, did Nation's Pride win on the same night that Modern Games won at Woodbine?
Yes, actually. Yeah, you're right.
Appleby had 2 runners that won within about 20 minutes of each other. And the horses stayed in the States. Nation's Pride hasn't shipped back like Modern Games came back to try, like we said, to try and pinch some prize money. So in Nation's Pride, it looks like a really solid bet for a couple of reasons. The next best in the market, a horse called Rebels Romance.
Yeah.
Rebels Romance is a big bit of equipment. It's almost like I wouldn't say dower. I've got the word dower written down on my notes here, which is probably slightly harsh on the horse. I don't want to give it a complex. But it's a big horse, and it takes a while to get organised. So again, we're looking at 2 turns. I think things are going to happen a little bit too quickly for Rebels Romance. Rebels Romance stretching out. You take it to Newcastle, and it'll grind down that straight mile, no problem. Things happen a little bit faster around 2 turns, and I think Nation's Pride will have the beating of it. And the other one in there was more like Goddess.
And the filly Mare, or the Turf. You're right. Yeah,
that's right. Mare. Should have won last year. Does keep finding trouble, and I think the polite way to say it is that she's a bit of a character. Is this right?
She can be a little bit of a character, but I will also say she also gets some interesting rides. That Joel Rosario gave her quite an interesting ride 2 back, and that's the only reason she lost that one race. I mean, that was just a horrendous job of. I mean, she was in trouble. I didn't think a horse could be in trouble for a whole mile and a half, and she was somehow. And I was like, this horse looks so uncomfortable. And then the last 500 yards, she's like just sprinting around everybody and just trying to get there, and just came up just short. But Bill Motza, he's a trainer who is a great horse person here in the United States, has a phenomenal reputation, and she's going to be a crowd favorite because people just always like the girls going up against the boys.
Yeah, absolutely.
In that spot. But I'm curious, how much of a factor, because I also like Nation's Pride quite a bit here. I was just curious how much of it was the fact that Buick stays on. I don't know the jockey politics of Charlie Appleby's barn. And so the idea that Buick, who always, at least to us, feels like his number 1 jockey, stays on Nation's Pride, whereas James Doyle takes Rebels Romance. I read a little bit into that, and I was like, oh, okay, so he might like Nation's Pride a little bit more than Rebels Romance in this case. I didn't know if that was something that raised flags for you too or not.
No, I would suggest they probably gave Buick the choice. I would have thought.
Interesting.
And Buick will have stuck with Nation's Pride, leaving Rebels Romance. So yeah, I wouldn't read too much into that. The Godolphin operation. You can say they know what they're doing, and Buick would have had the choice, and he'd have chosen that thing. I mean, if you go beyond Warlike Goddess in the market, and that brings in Mishriff, and from there downwards, it just again looked like an ignorance of alternatives to me. So I'm not in on Rebels Romance. Warlike Goddess, I think's got a chance. You said she's going to be popular, but really it just left Nation's Pride with a lot of ticks in a lot of boxes for me, and that plus 275 price looks okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mal, thank you so much again for coming on. This has been a lot of fun. Hope to have you on again in the future. But let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter and where they can find your content that you're putting out there for Sports Gambling Podcast Network.
Yeah, so I am on Twitter at Mal_B_sport. And if you're familiar with the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, you'll be familiar that we cover everything under the sun. I did some cricket recently. The Cricket World Cup's on, Matthew. I'm sure you've been watching that every day. And I'm getting just to the end of the MLB season, so I've been doing the MLB show every day. And shortly, the World Cup, the Football World Cup, the Soccer World Cup starts.
So yeah, you can say
any sport you need to know, the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. And like I say, and then I cover the horse racing for the boys as well. So lots of good fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on. And just a quick reminder to all of you watching to sign up and deposit at PlayUp Racebook and receive a 50% deposit bonus for up to $250 and deposit $100 or more before the Breeders' Cup. And they will give you an additional $25 free wager. Maybe you use that on Nation's Pride in the Breeders' Cup Turf. So for all of you out there, I hope you have a wonderful day. And remember to follow me on Twitter at the handle @FailToMenace. Make sure to like and subscribe to Trust the Profits on YouTube. And until next time, my name is Matthew Desantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.